To begin installation on your K&N air intake system, turn off the vehicle's ignition and disconnect the vehicle's negative battery cable. Next, disconnect the mass air sensor electrical connection and unhook the mass air sensor wiring harness from the airbox. Remove the two nuts that secure the throttle body cover and then remove the engine cover. Now it's time to remove the bolt that secures the AC mounting clamp. Save this bolt, as it will be reused later. Release the spring clamp and then remove the power steering pressure switch vent hose from the intake tube. Disconnect the fuel pressure regulator vent line from the fuel pressure regulator. Next, disconnect the crankcase vent hose from the valve cover. Loosen the hose clamps that secure the stock intake tube to the throttle body and airbox. Now it's time to remove the stock air intake from the vehicle. Install the three 1/4 inch NPT fittings into the K&N intake tube. Next, install the provided gasket onto the K&N mass air sensor adapter. Remove the two screws that secure the mass air sensor to the stock airbox and remove the mass air sensor. Install the mass air sensor block off plate provided onto the stock airbox. Be sure to install the provided gasket onto the block off plate before it is installed. Now it's time to install the mass air assembly into the K&N intake tube and secure it with the provided K&N hardware. It is important that you install the sensor with the opening pointed towards the air filter end of the tube. Install the supplied silicone hose onto the throttle body next. Be sure to secure it with the provided hardware. Release the 4 clamps securing the upper airbox and then remove the upper airbox. Remove the stock air filter as well as the 3 bolts securing the lower airbox to the inner fender. Next, remove the lower airbox from the vehicle. Drill out the rivet that holds the fresh air duct to the lower airbox. Remove the fresh air duct from the lower airbox. Next, it will be necessary to trim both sides of the fresh air duct. K&N recommends using tin snips to trim the fresh air duct. Now it's time to reinstall the fresh air duct into the lower airbox and secure it with the provided hardware. Reinstall the lower airbox into the vehicle and secure it using the factory bolts. Next, install the K&N air filter into the lower airbox. Install the upper airbox and secure it with the factory retaining clips. Place the silicone hump hose onto the airbox and secure it with a hose clamp. Install the K&N intake tube into the silicone hoses at the throttle body and airbox, securing them with the K&N provided hose clamps. Connect the open end of the 4mm silicone hose to the NPT vent fitting installed on the K&N intake tube. Connect the open end of the 4mm silicone hose to the fuel pressure regulator vent port. Connect the power steering pressure switch vent hose to the NPT fitting installed on the K&N intake tube and secure it with the factory spring clamp. Install the supplied crankcase vent hose to the NPT fitting on the K&N intake tube. Next, install the open end of the crankcase vent hose onto the factory fitting on the valve cover. Secure the AC hose mounting clamp to the K&N intake tube with the factory bolt removed in step 4. Reinstall the engine cover using the factory nuts. Reconnect the mass air sensor electrical connection. Reconnect the vehicle's negative battery cable. Be sure to double check to make sure everything is tight and properly positioned before starting the vehicle. After 100 miles of driving, check the nuts and bolts and retighten if necessary.